My name is Ryan Carter, and this happened in the summer of 2016 when I was 11 years old. My parents owned a small roadside motel just outside the Mojave Desert in Southern California. It wasn't the kind of place tourists plan to visit. Most people only stopped because they were too tired to keep driving. The motel sat a few hundred feet off the highway with nothing around it but desert. No restaurants, no gas stations, no other buildings, just sand, Joshua trees, and an endless stretch of road. Business was slow, especially during the week. Since my parents couldn't afford a babysitter, I spent most evenings sitting in the lobby after dinner, doing homework or watching old movies while my dad worked the front desk. There was one thing everyone noticed the moment they arrived. Our parking lot wasn't paved. It was covered in loose gravel. Every car that pulled in made a loud crunching sound. Even someone walking across it could be heard from inside the lobby. After living there for years, my family could tell the difference between a pickup truck, a motorcycle, or even footsteps without looking outside. That's why what happened that night has never made any sense to me. It was around 10:40 p.m. The lobby was completely quiet. My dad was in the back office finishing paperwork, and my mom was folding towels in the laundry room. I was alone at the front desk when the glass entrance door slowly opened. I looked toward the parking lot, expecting to see headlights. There weren't any. No car, no engine, no sound. Just a man standing in the doorway. He looked completely ordinary. Gray jacket, dark jeans, worn-out work boots. He looked like someone who had been driving for hours. But something about him immediately felt wrong. A strong chemical smell filled the lobby the moment he stepped inside. Not gasoline, not bleach. It smelled like chlorine, mixed with something industrial. The kind of smell that burned the inside of your nose. The man never looked around the lobby. He walked straight to the counter and stopped in front of me. For a few seconds, he just stared. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "Is there a room available for tonight?" I swallowed and nodded. "My dad handles the check-ins. I'll get him." The man didn't respond. He just kept looking at me without blinking. I hurried into the office behind the lobby. "Dad, there's someone here." He stood up immediately and followed me back. We couldn't have been gone for more than 8 seconds. But when we walked back into the lobby, the man had disappeared. My dad froze for a second, expecting the man to be somewhere in the lobby. He wasn't. The front door was still closed. No footsteps, no sound, nothing. Without saying a word, my dad pushed the door open and looked outside. The parking lot was empty. No headlights, no taillights, no car pulling away. Just the cold desert wind moving across the gravel. "Did he leave?" my dad asked. I don't know," I said. "He was standing right here." My dad walked across the entire parking lot, shining a flashlight between the parked cars and around the vending machines. There was nowhere to hide. The motel only had one entrance to the lobby, and anyone leaving had to cross the noisy gravel. We would have heard it. When my dad came back inside, he stopped walking. "What is that?" I looked down. A faint white trail stretched across the carpet, started at the front door, and ended right in front of the counter where the man had been standing. The marks looked almost like footprints, but they weren't made of dirt. They looked as if some kind of chemical had faded the color of the carpet. My dad knelt down and touched one with his finger. The carpet was completely dry. Whatever had caused the marks, it wasn't there anymore. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The trail only went one way. There were footprints leading into the lobby, but none leading back out. My dad stared at the floor for several seconds before quietly saying, "Stay behind the counter." He searched every vacant room, the laundry area, the storage closet, even the pool equipment shed. Nothing. The man had simply vanished. About 20 minutes later, the phone rang. My dad answered it. No one spoke. There was only a faint crackling sound, followed by what sounded like slow, steady breathing. Then the line went dead. Neither of us slept much that night. We kept telling ourselves there had to be a logical explanation. But deep down, it already felt like something was terribly wrong. The next morning, my dad tried to convince himself it had all been some strange misunderstanding. He rented out rooms, checked guests in, and acted like everything was normal. But every time he walked past the lobby, his eyes drifted back to the faded footprints. They were still there. By that evening, he decided to review the motel's security footage. Our camera system wasn't great. There were only 2 cameras. One pointed at the parking lot. The other covered the lobby and front desk. My dad loaded the footage from the night before. First, he checked the parking lot camera. Nothing. For nearly 30 minutes, the screen showed an empty gravel lot. No headlights, no vehicle, no one walking toward the building. He frowned and switched to the lobby camera. The video started with me sitting behind the front desk. A few seconds later, I suddenly looked toward the entrance. But the strange part was, the front door never opened. There was no one standing outside. Then, without warning, a man was simply there. One frame, the lobby was empty. The next frame, he was standing in front of the counter, staring at me. There wasn't a single frame showing him walking through the door. It was as if he had appeared inside the building. My dad replayed the footage over and over. Every time it was exactly the same. Then came the part that terrified both of us. I left to get my dad. The man didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't even turn his head. He just stood there, perfectly still. 7 seconds later, my dad and I walked back into the lobby. And one frame before we entered, the man was gone. Not walking away, not fading out, just gone. That night, my dad copied the footage onto an old USB drive. The next morning, he planned to show it to the local sheriff. But when he plugged the drive into his computer, the file was corrupted. Every other recording worked perfectly, except that one. A few months later, my parents sold the motel. We never talked about that night again. A few years ago, I drove back just to see if the building was still standing. It was abandoned. The windows were broken. The sign had fallen over. As I stood in the empty parking lot, I caught that same familiar smell. Chlorine, strong enough to burn my nose. I looked toward the shattered lobby window. For just a second, I thought I saw a man in a gray jacket standing behind the old front desk. Watching me, I didn't wait to find out if he was real. I got back in my car, and I have never driven through the Mojave Desert at night again.